right, let's get ready for a Thursday. Bullet points for you today. Sessions now in session. We'll talk about that. What about ISIS headed to Guantanamo Bay for detention? Mr. Gorsuch has some bad things to say about Mr. Trump. How's that going to fly? And good news, another several billion dollars coming to America just in time to create new jobs. That plus Jennifer Burke, Michael Daugherty, Trevor Thrall, Pete Hoekstra, and so much more. Get ready, get your coffee filled up. It's time for the Steve Gruber Show.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me, gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy.
Been a long education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
All righty, it is Thursday. Glad to have you signed up for the program. You know, there are limited numbers of seats here. Actually, that's not true. Anybody can come along, tell your friends, make sure they know. The hotline number to get involved with the conversation, 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. Tell all of your friends. Make sure they bring a notebook, though, because there's plenty to learn here each day. Let's start with this today. Surprise to some, this will be for sure. A couple of new tracking polls about the approval of the president in his job. According to Reuters, the president's approval rating above 50%, 50.1% for February the 6th. That's the latest number we have. Donald Trump cruising along above 50% approval rating, disapprove 47%. So still a split nation. But the point being is that at one point, I wondered if you would ever see 50% support. Now, at 50.1% according to Reuters, and the Rasmussen poll continues to cruise above 50%. He's at 53% as of today. 47% disapprove, so that number is pretty consistent as well. A lot of the angst, of course, over what's going on with the executive orders being the temporary ban on people coming here from 7 countries, which, by the way, the White House provided a list of 24 incidents involving folks from those nations involved in terrorist and terrorist-related activities here in the United States because the judge, Robart, out there in Washington, said from the bench that the administration, well, where are these terrorist events from these nations? Oh, there aren't any. He was sarcastic. He was frankly, he was a smartass. And the White House said, well, you be as sarcastic as you want, but here are 24 examples of people involved with terrorist attacks from those countries in the United States or terrorist-related activities over the last few years. Meanwhile, it's all going to change because Senator Jeff Sessions is not Senator Jeff Sessions anymore. It's Attorney General Sessions, winning confirmation last night to become the next AG of the country, capping a Senate fight so contentious that one of the nominee's biggest critics was forced by majority Republicans to sit out the last leg of the debate, that, of course, being Hiawatha. The Senate narrowly approved the Alabama Republicans' nomination in a 52-47 vote, the latest in a series of confirmation votes that have been dragged out amid Democratic protests. One Democrat, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, joined Republicans in voting to confirm Sessions. Sessions himself voted present only. He did not vote for himself. Joe Manchin, the first Democrat to break ranks, a guy who knows that coming up in 2 years, he's going to be up for re-election as a Democrat in bright red West Virginia. So a little bit of common sense coming out of Jeff Sessions. Now, with the new Attorney General, this next story becomes extremely important. The White House apparently finishing work on an executive order that would instruct the Pentagon to send ISIS fighters, Islamic State detainees that are captured, to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. The Obama administration had notably refused to send ISIS fighters captured in the fight to the detention facility, but for President Donald Trump, it is imperative to take high-level radical Islamic terrorist fighters off the battlefield. That according to the New York Times. Yeah, that according to the New York Times is taking them out. For some, the order could function as a de facto tripwire because it could allow federal judges to rule on whether or not the war against ISIS is even legal. That because Congress has declined to offer any explicit authorization. Wouldn't that be it? Wouldn't that be it? Another judge, another federal judge from Washington or Oregon weighing in and saying, well, Mr. Trump, you can't even take the fight to him. Instead, the Obama administration has relied on war authorization that granted in 2001 to George W. Bush in the first few days of his presidency. Obama argued that the fight against ISIS is a continuation of the fight against al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Such a claim is tenuous at best, mostly because while the seeds of ISIS first arose through al-Qaeda, the group has since become so utterly different from its patriarch that it makes sense to distinguish them as two separate organizations. And if the organizations are deemed separate, it's unclear how the 2001 war authorization would extend to ISIS, according to legal scholars. It raises huge risks, says Harvard law professor Jack Goldsmith, also commenting in the New York Times. If a judge says the September 11th authorization does not cover such a detention, it would not only make that detention unlawful, it would weaken the legal basis for the entire war against the Islamic State. Makes you feel good, doesn't it, when you know what the judges are like out there already? When you know what the politics are like out there already, maybe we should just, send them sandwiches and water. I mean, we could do that. Well, Congress decided the war against ISIS was wrong as long as President Trump was in charge, so we'll just send them, some sandwiches, some cold water, maybe get them a snack or two and whatever they need. One Army captain tried to sue former President Barack Obama in 2016, arguing that the war against ISIS is illegal, but his complaint was dismissed by a federal judge who said that he lacked standing for his lawsuit. But standing doesn't seem to matter as much anymore. I can tell you the states of Washington and Minnesota have no standing in bringing a lawsuit against the President of the United States trying to defend this country against those that could come here and do us harm. And yet that's still hanging out there, right? At any rate, we'll keep a close eye on this one. Will Guantanamo Bay become the catcher of ISIS fighters? It's 14 after the hour on this Thursday. Glad that you're tuned in today. Glad that you're here. 888-900-9966, the hotline. You're listening to The Steve Gruber Show.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
She's a very kinky girl, the kind you don't take home to mother. She will never let your spirits down. Once you get her off the street, oh girl, she likes the boys and the band.
All right, Thursday. Always good to have you here with me. I appreciate your support. How about this story? You may not have heard this one. Caught my eye yesterday, and I've been looking at it ever since. Going, I need more details. I don't know all the facts, but it seems pretty straightforward. A Buffalo mother, Buffalo, New York. A woman who withdrew her 2 children from public schools to homeschool them because the school was so bad. Arrested. Charged with child neglect. And the kids have been taken away from her. A single mother, Kiari Harris, filed all the required paperwork with the Buffalo City Hall to remove her kids from Buffalo public schools in early December because she said the school system was so bad she had to do something different. She also filed the individualized educational program to homeschool her kids, which she did for several weeks. She told WKBW, I felt like the system was failing my children, and that's when I made the decision to homeschool. I spoke directly to a homeschool coordinator, and she told me from this point on, my children were officially unenrolled from school. She said that adding the department stamped the paperwork received on December the 7th. But a week later, Child Protective Services called her home to ask why the kids were not in school. I told them the kids were homeschooled now and that I could furnish them the paperwork if they needed it. In mid-January, Harris was coming home, driving by her home, when she noticed several police vehicles at the multi-unit residence, one of which followed her for a short while before she was pulled over. Buffalo police presented the 30-year-old woman with a court summons for child neglect and demanded to know where her kids were to be removed from her custody. When she refused to turn them over, officers arrested her for obstruction of justice, impounded her car, and finally did find the kids and snagged them and yanked them out of her custody. Harris recorded a Facebook video and said, the problem is that Buffalo City Hall never notified her children's former school that the kids were no longer enrolled, which prompted the school to contact CPS for excessive absences. Harris had never previously been arrested or charged with any crime. She's a young black woman living in, one of these tougher places. She makes a decision to look out for her kids, put them in school with her because she said the schools are so bad in Buffalo, she had to do something. And the do-gooders show up and arrest her and take her children away because I'm sure that's the best possible outcome. This is what's wrong with too much government. Interestingly enough, investigators took the time to comb through Harris's social media posts so they could build a flimsy case of child neglect, but never bothered to call City Hall to check her story. Never called to see if the paperwork was in place. Here's a court document. Here I'm reading now from part of a court document. Respondent, that being her, recently posted a comment on social media ridiculing the school system and people who attend school or graduate from school. That was apparently evidence of her neglect of her children. First and foremost, I'm a high school graduate and a college graduate, she said. So would it make sense for me to ridicule someone who goes to school? No. What I posted was that the school teaches people to be smart idiots, people who cannot think outside the box. They can think in the form of textbook, what they've been taught, but they cannot think for themselves. My God, this woman's a genius. She ought to be picked up by the Trump administration to help Betsy DeVos. They can think in the form of textbooks, what they've been taught, but they cannot think for themselves, which is actually very true, she said. But first of all, how is it that indicative of me neglecting my children if I criticize the school system? Second of all, why is something I post on social media being put in a court document unless I'm directly threatening to hurt someone? Furthermore, why am I being stalked on my social media? Why are y'all searching for my name and scrolling through my posts? These people are trying to kidnap my children, said Harris. The single mother who successfully supports her children on a low income told WKBW it's now been 3 weeks since she has seen her children, and she's now fighting 2 cases in the court system, one for the obstruction charge and another to regain custody of her kids. I'm telling you, if there's an attorney listening right now that you figure out a way you can help this woman needs to stand up and be helped. She doesn't have the money for an expensive attorney. She's doing the right thing. She's looking out for her children, and she's being suffocated, absolutely suffocated, by a government that's out of control. This should never have happened, period. Someone along the way, anywhere in the system, after she was first contacted, should have simply said, now wait a minute, let's check the paperwork. Let's go down to City Hall. Let's see if what she's saying is true. I can provide the paperwork, she said. I've got the documents here. It's stamped. It's ready. It's legal. Nobody did that. Franklin Redd, a representative from the District Parent Coordinating Council, said CPS should not be here. The principal should have been circled back and told these students were unenrolled. The Buffalo Common Council expected to address Harris's plight at its at its meeting in the next few days. That according to WKBW. I mean, what an incredible story. The woman's on low income, doing the best she can, realizes that Buffalo is creating smart idiots. Is that the term she used? Smart idiots. I mean, this line is terrific. They can think in the form of a textbook, what they've been taught, but they cannot think for themselves. That's exactly right. That's the problem with many public schools today, with the government schools. They can think about what a textbook says, but they cannot think for themselves. What do you think? 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. You check it out. Jennifer Burke is next, co-founder of Politistick. A Black Lives Matter terrorist calls for the murder of whites and Donald Trump. We'll talk about it straight ahead right here on the Steve Gruber Show.
Genuine Michigan common sense on display every day.
All right, welcome back to it. It's the Steve Gruber Show on a Thursday. Trump supporters not welcome in an elite New York Republican club. Can you imagine the Republican club telling them that Donald Trump supporters not welcome there anymore? It's kind of a swanky place. Really? That's right. I'll take my money and go elsewhere. I'll have a scotch somewhere else. Neil Gorsuch, meanwhile, apparently saying that he finds the attacks by Donald Trump on Twitter of other judges demoralizing and disheartening. Well, you know what would be demoralizing and disheartening is Donald Trump called you up and said, hey, you want to go back down to the minor leagues? Just throwing that out there. Michael Daugherty, my next guest. Daugherty, welcome back.
Good morning. You know, I had a big debate about this last night because I got a bit of a Facebook fight with someone because I was like, judges are so thin-skinned. They are so not really held accountable. I know we're supposed to revere them, but really, get over yourself.
Yeah, call them out. Well, here's the thing. Neil, hey, can you come to my office and bring your briefcase with your application with you? We've had a couple of things come up here at the White House. We've decided to send you back. You know,
well,
serious.
If you look at it, it could be, you could assume, you could say, well, the behavior of the judges was demoralizing and disheartening. I don't know. You know,
I've got this other theory.
To the tape, or you listen to that debate, the real demoralizing and disheartening part was the actions of the DOJ lawyer.
Well, no question. He was weak, wasn't he?
He was weak.
But here's what I'm going with. I think Gorsuch, this might be, you know, here's the thing. I don't know what to assume or not assume about Donald Trump anymore, but I assume he's got a plan to win. That I can go safely with. And I'm wondering, and I floated this to a friend of mine. He says, I don't know. I said, what if, you know, Trump knows that Gorsuch is going to take a couple of shots at him? He said, go ahead and do that. Just don't be too over the top, because we need 8 Democrats to vote for you to make it easy. And maybe a comment like that he finds that the action's demoralizing and disheartening, maybe that helps him pick up Joe Manchin and Heidi Heitkamp and some of these others.
Maybe, except that I don't know that a white shoe type of judge like this guy will play that kind of political game. It's considered beneath him. So I don't.
Here we go again. Yeah, I should be revered because I demand it. So anyhow, on some other fronts, we've got. Did you see this story about possibly using Guantanamo Bay to house ISIS detainees? I mean,
no.
That's quite a story. That's an explosive deal, because if Donald Trump starts sending ISIS detainees, they're talking about legal problems. Congress and others and judges, federal judges, like activist judges, for example, if anything comes to mind, could say there is no legal war against ISIS, therefore we say that you can't do this. Because Barack Obama was using Guantanamo under the guise of the 2001 war authorization against Al-Qaeda and so forth, saying this is just an extension, but it's a long way from there.
Here's the difference. Then if he gets his deck stacked correctly, and now we have the Attorney General in place, so proactively get something passed in Congress.
Well, there you go. And speaking of passed in Congress, here's one thing. I mean, it's been, 3 weeks he's been in office? And people are up in arms because Obamacare hasn't been repealed and taxes haven't been cut. I mean, these things do take a bit of time, do they not?
Well, yeah, and Obamacare, here's the thing. There's several things he's learning once he's in-house, I would say, as I call it, in-house, since he's in the White House, is, Obamacare was so broad, and the power that Pelosi and Reid gave Obama in the law, never thinking that he'd not be president, never thinking they'd lose, is kind of nice because Tom Price is going to have a whole lot of clout. This is why the Democrats are freaking out. They sort of laced the drugs for themselves, and now they gave it to their enemy.
And they never conceived of the possibility they wouldn't be in charge.
Correct, because they're Democrats.
Brilliant.
And so there's a lot of things that you can do just repairing the law. The problem is, it's also the public is polling because I guess they have short-term memory, and we've got these terrible polls that here's a shock: half the country loves their free stuff. So, we love our pre-existing condition, and we love being able to keep our kids on the dole till we're 26. Now, that's okay, the way you handle it, but there's the market is not responding to removing the barriers on competition because the networks themselves aren't responding once they get access. Which means
right.
if an insurance carrier from another state comes into your state, they're not being able to build networks fast enough to have a competitive product. So those are the problems that are happening within releasing Obamacare's sort of clutches and building something else. So he's kind of cornered, and it's going to be tougher than he thought.
But all insurance companies, all they have to do is say, hey, we can sell insurance in Michigan. Well, what product do they need to build in Michigan that's different than health insurance in Ohio or Indiana? I mean, seriously, I buy my car insurance from Indiana.
They have to have. The problem is we have so allowed these oligopolies, monopolies to start, and so now the competition are the insurance carriers that have their networks established. So someone's going to have to start selling networks, and everyone, it's...
you mean networks to the doctors? Just
right.
So you're clear, networks to the doctors. The doctors accept the insurance,
correct,
and so on and so
correct.
forth.
Sorry, correct, and the networks of hospitals. So it's thank you, Richard Nixon. This is a great idea.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is a great idea.
It's
always the cleanup.
Happens. When you give politicians, permission to leverage your life and survival. They're politicians. They're smiling. Smiling people does not mean they're nice.
Tell lies.
Everyone, I want to learn this today. Smiling people doesn't mean they're nice.
No. Smiling faces tell lies. The old 60s song. Go to it. Daugherty, always a pleasure. Have a great rest of your day and weekend. Appreciate your input as always.
All right. Take care, buddy. See ya.
That is Michael Daugherty, everybody. Breaking it down to something we can consume and understand. You're listening to The Steve Gruber Show.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
My homework is
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
Do you remember the last time you trusted the news? Seriously, when was the last time you actually trusted the evening news? Turned it on and I don't care who you watch. Whether you're somebody who watches ABC or NBC or the cable channels like Fox or CNN. When was the last time you turned on and said, you had complete faith? I know you listen. I know you watch. But when was the last time you actually had complete faith in what you were watching on television news? Think about that for a second. Was it Walter Cronkite? Was it that long ago? Dan Rather before the fall? I don't know. I mean, some of these news anchors, of course, Walter Cronkite was as big as life itself. And I bring this to your attention because I want to play something from earlier this week I've been meaning to get to, but I haven't. Because I think it's very instructive about the problems with television news today. It's Scott Pelley from the CBS Evening News, the desk once held by Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America at the time. Here's how he opened the news a couple of days ago. It's breathtaking what he does here, to me. It's clip 16, Scott Pelley opening the CBS Evening News. And I want you to imagine if Walter Cronkite had done something like this, what would have happened? Go ahead, 16.
President Trump told a U.S. military audience that there have been terrorist attacks that no one knows about because the media choose not to report them. It has been a busy day for presidential statements divorced from reality. Mr. Trump said this morning that any polls that show disapproval of his immigration ban are fake. He singled out a federal judge for ridicule after the judge suspended his ban, and Mr. Trump said that the ruling now means that anyone can enter the country. The president's claims, whether imaginary or fabricated, are now worrying even his backers, particularly after he insisted that millions of people voted illegally, giving Hillary Clinton her popular vote victory. There's not one state election official.
Stop. I can't take any of this garbage. There is one state election official, by the way, Scott, that would say that there were irregularities in voting. That person is in Michigan because we had massive irregularities in southeast Michigan. We know that. Did people vote illegally? I would guess it's true. What did we hear yesterday or 2 days ago on this program? The Senate pro tem, the leader of the California Senate, said half of his family is here illegally, and they have illegal driver's licenses and green cards and Social Security cards. For Scott Pelley to say it's been a busy day for presidential statements divorced from reality. Well, the judge in Washington doesn't have standing in the eyes of many legal scholars, ones that I have listened to and read, and I happen to agree with what they say. The president has every right to defend this country, Scott Pelley, and you are an embarrassment to journalism if that's what you call that mess. That's a hot mess of garbage is what that is. And some of it's rhetoric. And, of course, you never took on Barack Obama for his many misleading statements, did you, Mr. Pelley? Of course not, because you're in the bag for one party. You're the PR. You are, I believe, the opposition. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Meanwhile, here closer to home, the scandal at Michigan State, unfortunately, continues to grow around sports doctor Larry Nassar. Nassar, who's 53, was indicted in December on 2 federal child porn cases for possessing and attempting to obtain child pornography. A third charge added just a couple of days ago in a superseding indictment that alleges Nassar had images and files destroyed. His attorney declined any comment. Between September 19th and 20th, Nassar caused a third-party vendor to permanently delete and destroy all images, records, documents, and files contained on the hard drive of a laptop computer, and the defendant threw in the trash a number of external hard drives, according to the indictment that was filed. Now, during the execution of a search warrant in September, police looked into a trash bin near the curb in front of Nassar's home and found several external hard drives, that according to an FBI agent who testified. The agent added that Nassar had more than 37,000 images or videos of child pornography on computers and hard drives taken from his whole property through the search. Of course, he's been charged with crimes associated with his work. This guy was one of the most revered sports medicine guys in the world until his fall from grace. Team physician for nearly 20 years, a team physician for USA Gymnastics for nearly 30 years. And since September, more than 60 women or girls have made sexual assault allegations against Nassar to law enforcement. More than 30 women and girls have filed lawsuits against Michigan State, Nassar, USA Gymnastics, saying that Nassar sexually assaulted them during medical appointments. And this case is, many say it's going to be worse than Penn State. And it's just truly unfortunate that this ever went on, that people didn't realize, and that we had this unfortunate situation going on year after year after year. In other news, for decades, the F/A-18 Hornet has been the Navy's frontline combat jet, taking off from aircraft carriers around the globe to enforce no-fly zones, carry out strikes, and even engage in the occasional dogfight. But the Navy's ability to use these planes now greatly hindered, according to a brand-new report. More than 60% of the jets are out of service. That number even worse for the Marine Corps, where 74% of its F-18s, some of the oldest in service, are not ready for combat operations. These figures are reflective of the erosion in readiness across all branches of the U.S. Armed Forces and a source of deepening concern for ranking military members and lawmakers in both houses of Congress. Top service branch officials sounded the alarm on a pair of congressional hearings this week about how bad the problem is. Let me give you an example. Our long-term readiness continues its insidious decline. Those words coming from Vice Chief of Naval Operations Admiral William Moran. He testified to that yesterday before the Senate Armed Services Committee. Insidious decline. I don't know how you could make it any more dire. While we are still, he went on, while we are still able to put our first team on the field, our bench is depleted. I mean, the good news, the first string is ready to go. The vice chiefs pleaded with lawmakers to repeal legislation limiting defense spending, arguing that fiscal constraints have crippled the military's capability to respond to threats both home and abroad. It's 14 after. Trying to keep you up to date on everything that we can. Trevor Thrall is next here on the program. Donald Trump's head, does he escalate or avoid what's likely to be a counterproductive war with ISIS? We'll talk about it straight ahead on the Steve Gruber Show.
Getting your day started with news from around the state and around the world. Common Sense Radio. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Welcome back to it on a Thursday. Sometimes I get so much stuff in front of me here, I get confused as to where I set certain scripts. You know, they vanish right under my nose. It's bizarre because I want to go back to that script about the ISIS use of Guantanamo Bay. Here it is now. Yeah, President Trump considering the possibility, apparently in an executive order, of sending ISIS combatants to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, but that could open a whole new can of worms. How do you escalate? How do you handle ISIS? How does it avoid being a counterproductive war? Trevor Thrall here, senior fellow at the Cato Institute's Defense and Foreign Policy Department. Trevor, welcome to the program.
Hey, Steve. How you doing?
Good. Glad to have you back. First of all, what do you make this ISIS to Guantanamo deal could create problems because there's never been an official declaration of combat or whatever against ISIS. It's been against Al-Qaeda and other groups, and Barack Obama skirted the issue by just saying it's an extension of what was signed in 2001. But at some point, you start using Guantanamo. I'm just going to guess you might get a judge somewhere who doesn't like Donald Trump who would issue an order to stop that from happening. What do you think?
I think you're right. I think that could happen. I think that for many reasons, this one included the use of force against ISIS and or other terrorist groups should be reauthorized by Congress to put everything on a clear, and a transparent playing field. I think, you're exactly right. The judge could trip Trump up here at some point, and it would be a huge mess.
You mean like a judge in, say, the state of Washington or Minnesota issuing a temporary restraining order that they have absolutely no standing to bring, and yet it's still hanging out there, no decision, while the president, who is in charge of national security and borders, is handcuffed.
Yeah, well, like it or don't like it, the rules have to be the rules for everybody all the time. So as soon as we can all agree on what those are, let's start following them.
We did agree on those one time. It's called the Constitution.
Yeah,
a federal judge in Washington, because in effect what we've done here, Trevor, is we've made the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals more powerful than the Supreme Court. Because as long as the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals will uphold anything that one of their activist judges does on the West Coast to stop this president, that in effect makes the Ninth Circuit the most powerful court in the world, superseding the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to pretend to understand, the ins and outs of all that stuff. But, it does seem like occasionally things get a little out of whack, shall we say. And
a little bit.
Ninth Circuit is acting a little bit above its pay grade.
Now, when we talk about the raid in Yemen, now we've got some problems with that, talking about taking ISIS on head-on and the other things that are going on. I mean, what does Donald Trump do here? I mean, you have the concerns that it could be a counterproductive effort. I think a lot of people do. How do we make sure that it works the way we want it to work?
Oh, man. This is an interesting one, because this one, I think, Trump haters are going to go, look, here he goes, being a jerk, and here, this proves everything we worried about. But guess what? This was a raid that Obama was just about to approve, but they wanted a moonless night to do it on. So they said, we're going to have to do it during the next administration. So in this case, actually, Trump was just following through on something Obama was doing already, which I think was a mistake.
You mean like imposing a travel ban on 7 nations that have ties to terrorism, just following through on Obama's laws and getting grief for it? I get it.
Yes. Well, and in both cases, pointless and possibly counterproductive. I mean, the funny thing about the ban, I mean, if you want to ban Muslims or people from places where there's terrorism, you might want to add a few countries to the list that aren't on there, pretty obviously. It's a colander, not a ban. But at any rate, I think this stuff in Yemen is, if we're going to go flying, Ospreys and sending special forces everywhere there's 15 guys with guns, we're going to be really busy for a long time. That seems like just sort of a waste of U.S. firepower and resources. But, and again, it's about priorities. Yemen is not very high on my set of priorities. I mean, we've been trying that approach of whack-a-mole for 15-plus years now, and I don't see the end in sight, nor has anyone from Yemen attacked the United States in a very long time. I think there's room for discussion.
We've had a couple in the last 10 years, because that's what the Trump administration put out, 24 incidents of people coming from those countries. I think there were 2 on there from Yemen, if memory serves, but a few on occasion. You're right, Trevor. Go on.
No, and I think people criticize Department of Homeland Security rightly for many different sorts of things, but the fact is we've gotten pretty good at defense. And if you look at all the people who have tried, most of them clowns and amateurs, but even, the real ones, most of the people who tried to come from somewhere else haven't had any success at all. Our problems are people who are already Americans. So, the game is not go kill people in Yemen. The game is mostly, it seems to me, figure out how to stop people here from doing things if you can. To me, the Yemen, stuff is mostly just a waste of time. It's like security theater for the most part. Feels good maybe for a moment, but just pisses people off and doesn't really add to your own security.
Fair enough, but you've got to go after ISIS in some places. Do you go after them in Iraq? Do you go after them in Syria? You can't just let it be, can you? Or do you just walk away from it altogether, is what you're suggesting? Well,
I think, that's a tough one. ISIS is, again, the beginning of Al-Qaeda in 2001 when they attacked, and then ISIS when they, flowered in the desert. I think those are special cases where the U.S. does need to go abroad and help people put down those threats. And the question then becomes how direct, how much force, exactly how do you do it? And I think that's the exact question the Trump administration is trying to answer right now. The Obama administration ended up in one place, which is we're going to help some, not very directly when we can avoid it, and mostly try to help Iraq and others do it. I think Trump's going to wind up probably somewhere similar, because I don't see what other choices he really has.
Trevor Thrall, Senior Fellow at the Cato Institute's Defense and Foreign Policy Department. Thank you for the conversation, as always. We will talk soon.
Great talking to you, Steve. Thanks a lot.
This hour of the program brought to you by DTE Energy, providing safe, reliable natural gas to businesses across Michigan. DTE Energy. Know your own power. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Genuine Michigan common sense on display every day.
All right, it's another busy day in D.C. Every day is busy, it seems, with this president around because he moves so quickly and so many things going on. My next guest, Pete Hoekstra, former chair of the House Intel Committee, congressman from the state of Michigan. Pete, welcome back.
Hey, great to be with you, Steve. Good morning.
Finally making some progress on some places. We have an attorney general finally after an exhaustive process, but still many of the president's cabinet members not in place. But Betsy DeVos is in. Pete Sessions is in. That's progress.
It's progress, but it's not very good, Steve. I think George Bush and Barack Obama, this far into their presidencies, the Congress, the Senate had approved almost all, if not all, of their cabinet nominees. The strategy here of Chuck Schumer is to slow roll this president. The longer he can delay in getting the cabinet positions filled, it's one less day that Donald Trump can work on implementing his agenda with his team in place. It's really, really outrageous, that we're at this point, and you got so many unfilled positions just because the Democrats have philosophical differences with some of these folks. Betsy DeVos, sure, she's for charter schools, she's for kids, but they hold up that for weeks. No, that's not fair. She just because you have a president is entitled to put into his cabinet the people that follow his philosophy. Same thing with Jeff Sessions. These are good people, and it's just too bad that the Democrats are unwilling to even work with this president.
It is deeply disappointing, unwilling to work with this president. And, they're going to block him at every point, no matter what. But here's what's interesting to me. I look at the polling at Rasmussen. His polling numbers, 53% approve. Reuters now has him above 50%. So despite everything that's going on, it seems to me that more people support him today, I think, than did on November the 8th. I think that every time that he's attacked, that he is marginalized, that the Congress and people like Chuck Schumer stand in the way, I think it actually strengthens Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah, and when they go out and protest in Berkeley and they destroy cars, they break windows and these kinds of things, it's like, well, okay, if these are the people that are angry with Donald Trump and this is how they're behaving, guess what? I'm with Donald Trump. You're absolutely right. Donald Trump said he was going to drain the swamp. I think Newt Gingrich said something like, he's going to figure out that when you drain the swamp, the alligators are going to get mad. They're not going to like it. And, yeah, the alligators are fighting back. The swamp is fighting back. And, I don't think it's going to work. Donald Trump is a hard-nosed fighter. And, yeah, they will wear him down, but I think he's going to have more energy and resolve than what a lot of people expect. And, this guy has an opportunity to successfully drain a good part of the swamp. And I too, am encouraged by what you see with the poll numbers, that the numbers are actually improving for Mr. Trump, for President Trump, as he's implementing this agenda and as the Democrats are throwing up these roadblocks.
Let me ask you this: as you look at this, this Judge Robart, I believe is his name, that is blocking the temporary ban from 7 nations. That in effect, this activist judge, has made the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals the most powerful court in America, because with the Supreme Court at 4-4. Whenever the Ninth Circuit comes back, and it's no telling when, this should be something that should be pressing and immediate if it has to do with national security. They still have not come back. And in effect, any activist judge in the West Coast could say, I'm going to block the president, even though they don't have standing. Any first-year law student knows they don't have standing, and yet they've stopped everything, making the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals the most powerful court in America, right or wrong.
Yeah, no, what you've got some judge who's questioning whether there's really a national security issue here. And, well, none of the people, nobody from these countries has actually committed a terrorist attack. Wrong. But bottom line, that's not his call. He doesn't get the daily intelligence briefs that the president gets. So, no, that's not his call. The law is clear. The president is given extraordinary powers to block entrance into this country of people who, for coming to America, is a privilege. It is not a right. And this judge is extending them an unprecedented right and is fencing in the presidency in an unprecedented way.
And what's what's troubling to me? What's troubling to me, you look at the two, if you will, everything, according to the media, that Donald Trump does is controversial. When he says it's time to take a break and go to the bathroom, that's controversial. If he says let's go to lunch, that's controversial. But when he does two things, one, he authorizes the building of a physical barrier, a wall on the Mexican border, which was signed into law, by the way, in 2006, with the support of people like Senator Obama, Senator Clinton, and Senator Schumer, among others. And then, of course, that's the most controversial thing. And then he signs into law this temporary ban, 120 days from these seven nations, which was the law put into place in 2015 by Barack Obama and his administration. And yet it's the most, it's when they call the media the opposition party, they're right.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you called them the seven nations, because the media has been calling the seven Muslim majority countries. I call them the 1+6. The one is Iran, which is the number one state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And the other six are failed states, which means their central government doesn't have control over many parts of the country, and means they can't provide us with the documentation where we could validate and do the security checks on the people that are coming from those countries. But, it's the seven Muslim, Donald Trump's going to be just fine. It's going to be hard, but he'll eventually start getting his team in place. And I'm just hoping that Mitch McConnell continues every time that they want to hold up a nomination. He says, fine, talk through the night, and we'll vote tomorrow at noon. But the thing is, I'm not sure why I think they get something like 30 hours of debate. This is one where, with the number of nominations, the assistant secretaries, the ambassadors, all of those kinds of people that are going to eventually have to be nominated, where they just say, hey, we're limiting the debate to 2 hours, and then we're going to vote. We're going to vote.
Yeah, I want to move on to something else, because we only have about a minute left here. With Pete Hoekstra. And that is, I can't believe that also from the media, Donald Trump hasn't repealed Obamacare yet. He hasn't cut taxes yet. He's been there 3 weeks. These weasels attack him for everything he does and then start nitpicking, he hasn't done what he promised yet. I mean, seriously, I'll give you 30 seconds for the last word.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He hasn't done those yet, but, you can't get Congress needs to legislate. This is now a responsibility of Paul Ryan. It's the responsibility of Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Mitch McConnell to begin the legislative process, and that's what Chuck Schumer doesn't want to do. He wants to debate confirmation and not be forced to legislate.
Pete Hoekstra, always a pleasure. I greatly appreciate your insight. It is unique and one of a kind. As always, thank you, sir.
Michigan, born and raised with Midwestern values and Michigan common sense.
Feel it.
All righty then. How are you doing today? Doing good? Looking for a movie this weekend? Well, I got just the guy. There he is now. Sneaking in the building, Ron Van Timmeren from Celebration Cinemas making his way in. Ron, welcome to it.
Steve, what's happening?
Oh, just enjoying. It's kind of that. This is honestly, Ron, perfect movie weather. It's 38 degrees and raining a couple of days ago. I'm thinking this is like the day you don't want to be, because it's that tweener time. It's muddy, it's rainy, it's nasty. Movie time.
Yeah, escape time. We're going to go someplace completely different than where we are, either that or Florida. Anyway,
okay.
Tonight you can do that, where the three big new titles, Super Bowl weekend is one of the slowest weekends of the year, so pay no attention to that lineup from last weekend. Let's go see the Lego Batman movie, Steve.
Okay.
No? Oh, well, okay, good.
Well, why not? Kids will love it.
Yeah, it's good for laughs. I mean, well, we all remember fondly 2014, how much fun we had with the original Lego movie, and now, of course, we're going with the Batman theme. You got Will Arnett back doing that voice, Michael Cera's Robin, Rosario Dawson as Batgirl, Zach Galifianakis, easy for me to say, Zach Galifianakis as the Joker, and others. It just looked, well, one reviewer called it joyously bonkers. Let's go bonkers tonight, shall we?
All right, I don't mind. I mean, if the kids like it, it says rude humor, but other than heck, the kids hear some rude humor around the house.
It is PG and nothing more rude than you're going to hear around Steve's house. All right.
There you go.
It is Valentine's weekend, kind of extended or pre-Valentine's Day. So here comes the new 50 Shades movie called 50 Shades Darker. The reviews are going to be bad. You know that. They were for the first one, and it did $500 million worldwide. And so they're going to keep making them. Dakota Johnson and Jamie Dornan are back. Kim Basinger joins the cast. I like one reviewer called it Hallmark meets Playboy. I guess R-rated, you know what to expect, right?
Hold on. Who did you say joins the cast?
Kim Basinger.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think she's always looked attractive to me, don't you think?
Yes, but I mean, it's been a long time since I've heard her name mentioned in a movie, I believe.
Yeah,
that was my point.
She's had a few brief cameos or supporting roles, but and this is another brief one. But anyway, you know what to get there. Again, rated R, brief sensuality, it says here, or light erotic frisking, as some other I read somewhere
light
else.
Erotic frisking. Is that a thing?
I guess so. Got to see 50 Shades Darker to find out the definition of that. Hey, if action is your thing, Steve, John Wick Chapter 2, Keanu Reeves is back, and of course, this is right in his wheelhouse. He does these action things where he doesn't have to actually act, right? It's big action pieces, gunplay, a lot of bodies flying. I mean, you got to be ready for John Wick's body count here. But you know what? 95% fresh from critics. I'm shocked at how the critics love this movie. Also, Lawrence Fishburne, Ruby Rose, Ian McShane in this movie as well.
95% fresh for a John Wick movie.
Yeah, the first one the critics like too. You know, creative ways of dispatching the bad guys is always good for some critic reviews. So, but again, man,
there you go. As long as Keanu Reeves doesn't have to spend much time doing any actual acting, we'll be just fine.
Right, exactly. And hey, and don't forget, there's really some great Best Picture nominees still playing in theaters, like Hidden Figures, La La Land, and Lion. Those are my top 1, 2, and 3 for date night this weekend. If none of these big new movies hit your fancy button, but Lego's tracking to be $70 or $80 million this weekend, sure to be number one.
But isn't Split still sitting up top, controlling the world and the money?
Yeah, but that ain't saying much. The competition last week didn't really step up to the plate. Rings came in second place, Space Between Us in ninth place. So, yeah, again, Super Bowl weekend is just a dead week, but Split 3 weekends in a row, number one. That's pretty impressive.
I think the new Lord of the Rings, though, you'll love this. Tom Brady. All right, at least I got that out of the way. Lord of the Rings, Tom Brady. Anyhow, okay, good. I tried it twice. It failed twice. Good. Glad to hear that. Hey, tell me tell me about your online ability to buy tickets.
Oh, yeah. It's, reserved seating is the thing now, okay? Especially with movies like Lego Batman going to be selling out this weekend. Go to celebrationcinema.com. You can pick your seat in advance. Guarantee yourself the spot you want to sit in. If you're into recliners, like we've got in many of our theaters, you can pick out a recliner, and you get to the theater, you walk in, you sit down. It's a beautiful thing. You don't have to wait in line. You're right to the seat of your choice, as they say. And over here in Grand Rapids at Celebration North, you can stop by our new Oscars bar and have an adult beverage before you go to the movies. Open now at Celebration North in Grand Rapids.
There you go. See, now we got it all. Thank you, Ron. Where are you going to be?
I'll see you at the movies.
There it is, Ron Van Timmeren, everybody. And, yeah, well. So, some of the lines work, some of them don't. That's why you practice them here, and, nobody's listening anyway. All right, so how about this story? This is just a great little story that I found yesterday. Sophomore LaMelo Ball of Chino Hills, California, found a remarkable way to reignite excitement after the Huskies had their 60-game win streak end over the weekend. The team had won 60 in a row. They lost for the weekend. He decided to fire him up. His brother was hurt and out, so he's a sophomore. LaMelo Ball is a sophomore. And he comes into the game, and he drains 92 points en route to a 146-123 win over Los Osos. 92 points. I'm not kidding you. Let me see here. 30 of 39 from the floor, 7 of 22 from three-point range, and 11 of 14 free throws. And when he wasn't scoring, he also had 7 assists. In fact, he scored 41 points in one stretch of the second half in 8 minutes. 41 points in 8 minutes he drained. Think that kid's got a future in college? Oh, his brother's already at UCLA, and he's committed. 52 after on the Steve Gruber Show. I'll be right back.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me, gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy.
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
All right, and welcome to it. 6 minutes after on this Thursday. Glad to have you aboard. This part of the program brought to you by DTE Energy, providing safe, reliable natural gas to businesses across Michigan. DTE Energy, know your own power. Polling numbers might surprise many of you, but they don't surprise me particularly. According to Reuters' latest survey of the president's approval ratings, just over 50%, 50.1% approve of the job Donald Trump is doing. That's his best number to date. His best number since he took office. In fact, it's the first time he's broken 50%, according to the Reuters poll. Disapproval is at 47%. According to Rasmussen, the president's approval number, 53% today. 53%. It's been as high as 57 or 8. Rasmussen been above 50% pretty much the whole time since he took office on the 20th of January. Dipped on the 31st of January. Has been rising steadily ever since. So Donald Trump's approval ratings may surprise some. But as the media and the Democrats continue to battle him, in illogical ways, in ways that look like petulant children, I think it seems to help him. I'm not kidding you. It seems to help him tremendously as he continues to enjoy approval ratings above 50%. Last night, finally, Jeff Sessions approved as the Attorney General, which will help greatly in the president's battles with executive orders like the one that's been held up by the federal judge in Washington state, where he said that the president had overstepped his bounds. And The administration says the Washington State judge does not have standing, but the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has not made a decision yet, not made a ruling. They're trying to tie themselves into pretzels to figure out how they can shoot down Donald Trump. That's for sure. But Sessions won confirmation Wednesday night to become the next Attorney General of the United States, capping a Senate fight so contentious that one of the nominee's biggest critics, Senator Elizabeth Warren, was actually forced by a majority of Republicans to sit out the last leg of the debate because she was demeaning other senators in the proceedings. She was forced to sit down. One Democrat did join the Republicans, Joe Manchin, and Jeff Sessions himself did not vote. But one Democrat, there's a light of hope. Joe Manchin, the common sense Democrat from West Virginia. The hotline's open for you today, 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. Jennifer on the line. Always a pleasure. Jennifer, what's on your mind?
I thank you so much. You know, I've been thinking, since all these Hollywood let's pretenders have decided to give themselves award after award after award, I think the American people, the taxpayers, ought to have a Darth Vader award that we can award to the most vile politician and judge of the year. And I would dearly love it to nominate Judge Hobart, the 9th District Court, Chucky Schumer and Hiawatha.
With those your nominees? Well, who are you going to pick, Elizabeth Warren or Chuck Schumer?
I'll tell you what, on this particular instance, I would extend the award to 3. I'd give them all an award.
All right.
I am
you know what? We'll keep the nomination
all
process.
Donald Trump is trying to do is to protect the American people, to protect you and me, my grandchildren, my family. How can anyone say that this is not right and proper? If anything happens, it's on the shoulders of that idiot Judge Hobart. It's his responsibility. Right. If something happens, he's the one that precipitated it.
Jennifer, always a pleasure. Feelings. Here's what we're going to do, though. We're going to keep the nomination process open. You know, I think she hasn't. The most vile politician will take your nominations, but you'll need some supporting evidence as to why you feel that way. Our next litigant coming in is Mike from Ann Arbor. Mike, welcome back to the program.
I love Jennifer, and she stole some of my thunder.
She does that sometimes. She's so good at it.
She is fantastic. My wife is jealous of her, to be honest with you. I always think of Jennifer as one of the smartest people, and I love the way she attacks the Democrats. The next time, and there will be a next time we have an attack in this country, Jennifer is correct. We need to have that judge, his picture, his name, his address exposed by the President of the United States. And this goes for every judge on the appellate court in California, the Ninth Circuit Court. They need to be put out there for the public to see because they are going to be the ones responsible for the deaths of people. And now...
but hold on, Mike. Hold on. Let's have a serious conversation about this. You start putting judges' names and pictures and so forth out there for all to see and all to consume, you're inciting violence as well, and I don't think that raises us above the din. I think that puts us on the same level if we were to support such a thing. And my mother always said, don't lower yourself to their level, beat them with facts, beat them with the truth. And I think we're better off doing that, because if we were to do that, then the left would be doing the same thing, which they do sometimes, and I find it maybe not the best choice.
Steve, we are in a fight for the survival of this country. We played clean. They played dirty. It is time that we give them a taste of their own medicine. I'm sick and tired. I'm 72 years old, and I've watched this country fall with every decade. We are fighting for the survival of the United States, and how we bring the survival is up to us. We have to fight them. They're getting away with murder. They're now calling for the death of Donald Trump and white people. Black Lives Matter. Wow. We need to go after the guys that support them. We need to go after the people that support them.
We have to go after the money, I think, is one of the places we have to go, Mike. No question. Great call. Greatly appreciate it. Let's shift down the line. Chris standing by in Lansing to chime in. Chris, welcome aboard. What's on your mind?
I wanted to talk to you about Channel 6 and Bernie porn. They run this guy's polls constantly. He was wrong darn near every time during the political race. I believe he's wrong today. And I just think that Channel 6 is constantly running anti-Trump propaganda that has a lot of Michiganders with bad taste in their mouth right now.
Well, that's not just unique to one television or one radio station. You know that. I mean, look at the polling in general. Right now, Rasmussen has Donald Trump with a 53% approval rating, and the Democrats are like, that can't be trusted. You can't trust that poll. Why? Because it was one of only 2 polls that showed that Donald Trump was going to win the election on November the 8th. I think Scott Rasmussen has more credibility than any of the other polling, and if you don't like the polls you're seeing, you have a right to question those, Chris. I appreciate the phone call, and you have a right to question their veracity and how they're being conducted and who are they talking to, and more importantly, what questions specifically are being asked. But according to Reuters and according to Rasmussen, Donald Trump was well over 50% approval rating in this country, and it seems to be climbing at the moment. Every time he gets attacked, it seems to climb a little bit more. Keep that in mind. It's the Steve Gruber Show. When I come back, Congressman Tim Walberg will join me.
Getting your day started with news from around the state and around the world. Common Sense Radio. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
All right, it's Thursday here on the program. Glad that you are stopping by to spend some time with us. It's the 9th of February. Another warm stretch in store for us, but for the Northeast, a lot of snow. They're going to get pounded for the next couple of days, apparently, so good luck with that. My next guest, Congressman Tim Walberg from Michigan's 7th Congressional District, back here because it's Thursday. Congressman, welcome back.
Hey, good to be back with you.
It seems the wheels are turning, albeit slowly, in Washington. Betsy DeVos confirmed. Jeff Sessions confirmed as the Attorney General. We're starting to make a little bit of progress, but the obstruction is, well, it's unprecedented.
Well, it is unprecedented, and minority parties will always push back. We've done that, but not the way it's being done here. This is just simply trying to stop the wheels and the gears from turning. And by this time, President Obama had a number of people confirmed beyond what the Democrats have allowed the Republicans this time. But it's working, and finally, with a majority and 51 votes, things are going through, and we finally have an Attorney General. That's a good thing, especially in light of what the Ninth Circuit Court justices are attempting to do with a legal delay, slow down, not a ban as being talked of refugee immigration issues.
So how do we, and that's something we've been talking about ever since this occurred. Basically, this activist judge has stepped out of where he's out of his lane, if you will. And I don't believe he has standing. And yet the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in California has done nothing so far, making the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals the most powerful court in America today, because the Supreme Court has been taken out of the conversation by one activist judge on the West Coast.
That's absolutely right. And when you read the law that gives the president the power for a limited period of time to put a ban like this on of further refugee incursion, I guess you'd say, into the country, because there are deep concerns about terrorist actions, the potential of getting terrorists without having a true vetting process that's capable of doing what's necessary. The president has, by law, very, very literal, simple reading of the law says that's his power. So for a judge, an activist judge, to put a stop on it, and for a 3-judge panel in Ninth Circuit to spend this much time over something that a layman can read and see the reasoning behind it, just has to be politically motivated, philosophical from the liberal side of the bench.
Well, here's my concern, Congressman, and it is for a lot of folks, is if this one activist judge on the West Coast can do it for this executive order, he can do it for the next one. He can do it for a whole host of things. Right now, we are learning that the White House might be preparing an executive order to send ISIS detainees to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And I could see an activist judge saying, well, you can't do that because actually it's not an authorized fight, because President Barack Obama merely extended the fight that began in 2001 by covering ISIS, although it's not particularly accurate anymore. I mean, these activist judges have been empowered by this guy. It's unsettling.
Well, it comes to, I think, a point in time, Steve, where Article 1 powers have to assert themselves, and that can only take place when you have a majority that will do it. And that's the challenge. But there's clear provision in the Constitution for establishing certain inferior federal courts as deemed necessary by Congress, and they can be removed. Either a judge or an entire panel can be removed if we deem them to have committed, all it says is bad behavior. So bad behavior, in my book, would say violating the Constitution, overstepping your powers.
I agree.
Trying to push back the authority that you don't have. So, again, I think there's talks going on about how we would ultimately handle something like that. But, again, it takes more than just a handful of us that are growing very, very concerned about the fact that the third article power is really asserting extreme power at this time in stopping the movement of government outside of their box.
Well, exactly. So I guess my concern, looking at the obstructionists on the Democratic Party, the problem with activist judges, the complacency and the media being, I think Donald Trump put it right. They are the opposition, all joined on the same team, and yet I see Donald Trump being more popular, and people I talk to and people that supported him previously, and more people, because every time he gets pushed back, I think it helps and strengthens his agenda to get things done.
Well, I think you are seeing that. Generally, Americans are fair-minded, and whether they agree with everything Donald Trump said to get elected, his approach to it, ultimately he was a guy that said, I love America. Things aren't going right in America. We're losing our power. We're losing our freedoms and control, and I want to take it back and make it great again. And that resonated across the spectrum of people. And now as they see people whining, like Nancy Pelosi and others, and the indivisible group that's out there that's setting in place all sorts of mechanisms to just throw sand or rocks in the gears of progress, not for any good purpose, just because they don't like the outcome of the election. I think fair-minded people are starting to step up and say, boy, we do have a problem, and we'd better support someone who wants to move forward. And I think that's why he has the purchase power that he has, even though he says things that many people say, just think a little bit and rephrase that sentence, think about putting that tweet out. And yet, in the end, people at this point in time are willing to give him a bit of
well, I think he should back off on the tweeting, too. I don't think, necessarily demeaning the judges is the right way to go, demeaning the fact that they might not have standing, but the personal attack type thing I think we could do without. I don't think it advances the conversation very well, but this is a conversation we continue next time, Congressman, as we are out of time for today, but greatly appreciate you stopping through as always.
You have a great day and have a great weekend.
Congressman Tim Walberg, everybody, Republican from Michigan's 7th District. Back in a moment on The Steve Gruber Show.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
Well, I wish I was a catfish swimming in a deep blue sea. I would have all you good-looking women fishing after me.
Stuff like that. I just feel about driving to the Slippery Noodle in Indianapolis and listening to blues music for the rest of the day. But, I have a job to finish here, so the Slippery Noodle will be on hold for a minute. My next guest, Mac Zimmerman, Americans for Prosperity, Director of Strategic Communications. Mac, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well. You guys had pledged your support for Betsy DeVos for Secretary of Education. That seems to have worked. Tom Price will also make it through for the Department of Health and Human Services. A lot of delays here, a lot of obstructionist behavior by the left, but in the end, slowly but surely, they're all becoming confirmed. First, let's start with Betsy DeVos. And I took the opportunity to go back and look at some of her older interviews over the past couple of weeks with John Stossel and others. You know, for a person they paint as the devil, she seems pretty well-spoken, pretty well-educated, and pretty well on her way to offering something that could really help, well, poor children, for one example, get into better schools. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head. I mean, the delays and sort of the demonization I mean, I guess it's not shocking by Washington standards, but it's pretty rough stuff. I mean, she, her cardinal sin, her crime, in terms of how the Washington establishment works, is that she's actually willing to call out how badly our education system is performing, and has the temerity to think that the education system is here to actually educate kids and not to employ bureaucrats and generate union dues. So, I mean, they pulled out all the stops, and you even saw some people vote against her, like Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey and Senator Michael Bennet from Colorado, two people who have, in their rise to their big Senate comfy chairs in Washington, talked a lot and paid a lot of lip service to things like school choice and charter schools and trying to help kids get out of failing schools. But, when it came down to crunch time and they had to put their money where their mouth was, they sided with the teachers union and that gravy train that funds the liberal movement in this country, instead of siding with really somebody who's, done a lot to help a lot of kids, frankly, out of the goodness of her own heart, and trying to make sure that somebody's zip code doesn't dictate their future. So we were pretty disappointed.
Exactly right.
That.
The opportunity to use school of choice. I also like the voucher idea, but I don't know how much traction that'll get in this administration. Just the idea that a parent could have the opportunity to get their child out of the school district and into a better place, hopefully would be embraced. Of course, there's a story out of Buffalo right now, a mother that was arrested because she homeschooled her children, having filled out all the proper paperwork to get her kids out of the projects and out of a bad school in Buffalo. And the government there reacted by arresting her and seizing her children. So hopefully it's a new day in America with Betsy DeVos.
Yeah, I mean, that is an unbelievable story. I mean, you think about all the different sort of priorities on the criminal and public safety front, and it really kind of shows you the power that these vested interests have to be able to initiate something like that. I mean, the good news is, and I think you raise a good point, definitely the confirmation, the 5150 confirmation, razor thin, precedent setting where the vice president had to get involved. I mean, we're happy that happened, but that's just the beginning of the fight. Expanding school choice and parental choice is certainly going to be a tough lift, but I mean, I think it's going to help a lot to have somebody running the Department of Education who's not hostile to those ideas and who is going to challenge the status quo and who is going to look at new ways to kind of approach this question and figure out ways to let parents sort of really dictate the future.
Well, here's what I think the biggest challenge, Mac, and you help me out and tell me what you think about this. Mac Zimmerman here from the Americans for Prosperity. I think the biggest challenge that Betsy DeVos is going to face is the education establishment, which has been entrenched certainly since Jimmy Carter created the Department of Education. But you've got the National Education Association here in Michigan, the Michigan Education Association. All states have similar organizations. The American Federation of Teachers. You've got school boards. You've got billions and billions of dollars that are locked up here. You've got people that have nice, cozy government jobs, and they want to say that they're for the children. But oftentimes you hear these folks talk, the last thing that gets mentioned is the kids. It's about how many kids are in the class, the working conditions of the teachers, tenure, all of these things. And the last thing they discuss oftentimes are the students themselves, because you have this education establishment which is fed by billions of taxpayer dollars, and this apparatus and this hierarchy, and I think that's going to be the biggest problem that she faces.
Oh, yeah, big time. I mean, look, there's an old joke that the teachers union will start caring about children when children start paying union dues, and I don't even know that that's much of a joke. I think that's pretty much the way it actually works. And, I think, the vested interests you're talking about are a big problem. I mean, you look at the teachers unions, both in the states and at the federal level, and probably, I guess, arguably the environmental movement, the radical Greens are the ones who are sort of funding the entire liberal political movement in this country. So, yeah, I mean, they're going to...
And where does that money come from? That money comes from George Soros in large part and people like him. But I want to stop just for a second and back up just one step here, because earlier this week, Eric Greitens, the new governor of Missouri, made Missouri, the 28th state that has right-to-work laws on the books. New Hampshire could happen as soon as late this week or possibly next week, being a right-to-work state. These all have an impact on that education establishment by weakening these unions we just discussed.
Absolutely. And, of course, Kentucky also took that step. So, I mean, you can see sort of this groundswell of support for the notion that people shouldn't be forced to join these sorts of membership organizations and unions against their will, and frankly being forced to fund political activities that they don't agree with. And I mean, I actually think that most teachers in public schools, the overwhelming majority, are good teachers who want to try to do a good job and help kids have a brighter future. And I think a lot of times those folks are not very excited about the activities of the union. But, of course, as you know, speaking up about that and risking retaliation from your colleagues and being silenced, and I mean, that's the thing that
being called a bigot and a racist and a misogynist and a xenophobe and all those things if you believe anything on the right, because you don't believe these most wonderful, accepting, loving people, if you don't believe exactly what they believe, you might get labeled and demonized and ostracized. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, who can you imagine? But, yeah, I mean, these right-to-work efforts and sort of what Scott Walker did in neighboring state over in Wisconsin with Act 10, I mean, these are things that kind of free the hands of these good teachers, allow them to stop funding some of these political causes, and frankly, break the back of some of these organizations that are a lot more interested in protecting bad teachers than they are in promoting better futures for kids.
Right, and I'm just going to say the best hope for kids in poor schools, kids that, if you will, are on the wrong side of the tracks, for lack of a better term, but you know what I mean by that. They grew up in the bad part of town, if you will. You use the zip code analogy, same thing. We cannot permanently pigeonhole these children into a hopeless future. And so if it's time to try something new, it's time to try something new. And if that means that the unions get their toes stepped on, so it is. But it's time to try something new so that more kids in this country will have a better chance of having a successful future. Mac, I'll give you 20 seconds for the last word.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you hit it on the head, and frankly, you know, it's very interesting to me that a lot of the people that are the biggest opponents of school choice are folks that don't actually send their kids to public schools. And I think our ex-president, Mr. Obama, is a great example of that. You know, he's not a fan of school choice, but he certainly doesn't send his kids to Washington, D.C. public schools, and there's a reason for that.
No, what did he do? He chose the best school he could find. Thank you, Mac. Got to run. Greatly appreciated.
Taking a closer look at the stories that affect you most with a big dose of common sense.
Welcome back to it, 45 after. Are we there? All right, there we go. For some reason I was talking to myself. I do that a lot. Don't worry about it. I walk around muttering to myself. People look at me strangely in grocery stores and other places. It's cool. Tom standing by on the hotline in Grand Rapids. You can do the same. 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. Tom, what's on your mind?
Okay, now that Senator Sessions has finally been confirmed as Attorney General, we can get down to business of draining the swamps and probably begin with a couple things like looking into the sanctuary cities nonsense. Judicial Watch is calling for prosecution of Clinton transgressions against the citizens of the USA. They're asking for accountability, and they're digging in like bulldogs to pursue that. And on the third thing I'd like to add, and you brought it up earlier this week, illegal alien voter fraud. You were talking about this guy out of California, De Leon. and who admitted that
Kevin De Leon, half his family's here illegally, and he says they have driver's licenses, frauds, Social Security cards, fraud, green card fraud, so they're dealing with identity theft in some places, committing other crimes, and yet they would have you believe that none of these folks are voting. Come on. How does that even stand the stink test?
Well, hey, don't you believe that, Steve? Don't you believe that none of those folks are voting? They wouldn't.
No, I don't.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? If they investigate this thing like it truly should be investigated, I bet you that estimate, Trump's estimate of 3 to 5 million illegal votes is going to be extremely low. I bet you it's going to be more than that.
It could
be.
But
we need a real investigation. Now, the problem is you got the Republicans like Ryan and Mitch the Pillar of Jello McConnell saying, "Hey, we don't need to do this. This is not. There's no evidence. We got bigger fish to fry."
Well, there is evidence because Pew Research did a survey a couple of years ago where they found 14% of the illegals that they were able to survey and get an answer from, and those are just the ones that answered honestly, bear in mind. And they found that 14% were registered to vote, and at least 6% had actually voted. That would get you up to 1.5 million people right there, maybe 2, depending on what the real numbers are out there. So that's a couple of million people, illegal votes right there.
There were other investigations by colleges. One of them was Old Dominion, and they found similar results. So, these people keep brushing this stuff aside. I think this president that we got now is going to do something about it, hopefully. Hopefully he can... See, I voted for the guy. I hadn't voted Republican since before 2000. I got so sick and tired of the nonsense, I started voting third party. But now that Trump is in, maybe we'll see something done in our country, finally. Hopefully.
Well, you'd like to hope
I'm praying for it. Good luck, Steve.
I greatly appreciate that, Tom. Thanks for checking in from Grand Rapids, WJRW, the station over there that he's listening to. Greatly appreciate the efforts. The hotline number is 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. When it comes to some of these things that Tom was talking about, like the repeal of Obamacare and a replacement with some other plan, when you look at the states that support a repeal and you look at the states that oppose a repeal, shocking, it looks much like the presidential election map. Think about that. There are about 32 states, or 33, that the people there support the repeal of Obamacare. And the other states, those being many of them clustered in the Northeast and the Pacific Northwest and California, of course, plus Illinois right in the middle of all of it, these states support the continuation of Obamacare, even though it is unsustainable, financially speaking. It cannot stand, it cannot hold. And you realize that that's the way we are breaking down politically. The Democrats really are becoming a party of the coasts, if you will. A party of the coast is what they are becoming ever more every day, it seems like. And in fact, I just saw an article here that I want to share with you. Let's see here. I just saw this article that the Democrats, if they don't start to find support at the state level, the Democratic Party, as you know it, could cease to exist because their base is getting smaller and more concentrated. And it's concentrated in places like New York and Illinois and California. So, yes, they get millions of votes. I mean, for example, Hillary Clinton won California by more than 4 million votes, I believe, that the last time I looked at it. More than 4 million votes. She won California. Well, if that's the case, then their voting strength is there. It's not across states like Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and other states could fold too. States like Minnesota that still went for Hillary Clinton could someday soon find themselves heading toward being red. Because if Democrats don't get their act together, the Democrats aren't going to exist. The party will die. The party will die without statewide gains because they've lost so many governorships, so many seats in state senates and state legislatures. They've lost so much across this country, 1,000 seats in all during Barack Obama's tenure. And yeah, they had 3 million people show up in women's marches around the world on the day after Trump was inaugurated. And they brought in $20 million to the ACLU in just one weekend after the immigration order. But yet all of that doesn't mean anything if they can't get elected to statewide offices in states all over this country. The Democratic Party is in deep trouble, and the party will cease to exist without statewide gains. Trust me on this. 52 after, you're listening to The Steve Gruber Show.